of capacity development actions in the water sector. We've heard a lot already about the importance of capacity development, and capacity development has a lot of very diverse aspects and elements. And I am from the International Atomic Energy Agency. My name is Jodie Miller. I manage the Water Resources Program at the agency. And one of the things that we do is we do technical capacity development. We develop methods, scientific methods, we develop instruments, and we use those to help member states analyse their water samples. And that's the type of capacity development that we do. We have some ideas about how the types of capacity development that we do could contribute to SDG 6 and acceleration. And we have some people who are joining us today to discuss what capacity development means to them and how it can add value to the water action agenda. So if I could have the next slide, please. So these are our speakers and our panelists today. We have Ms. Najat Mokhtar, who is the Deputy Director General of the International Atomic Energy Agency, my boss. Professor Eddie Moore, who is the Rector of IHE Delft. Thank you. Professor Viviana Ray from University of Pisa. We have Ms. Agnes. Agnes, I'm never very sure how to pronounce your surname. There we go. Who is from Kenya. I've not improved in 20 years, so I know when to cut my losses. And then we have Francois Berton, who is from the World Bank. Afternoon. It's not Washington. And then also, last but definitely not least, we are joined by Emma, who is an MSc student. She represents the youth. A lot of our capacity development actions are going to be for supporting the youth of today in developing their career. So we're interested in hearing her perspective. Before we start on our panel discussion, though, I would like to hand over to DDG Mokhtar, who will make an opening statement.
Thank you, Jodie. Good afternoon, everybody. As Jodie said, my name is Najat Mokhtar, and I'm the Deputy Director General of the International Atomic Energy and the Head of Nuclear Science and Application. And I'm sure you know the agency through its activity as watchdog, and you have heard about the agency many times in the news related to Ukraine, related to Iran and other things. But I'm not sure you know what we do in the development area. And actually, my department offered the technology to our member states to really help addressing issues in wide range, from human health, food security, water management, environmental monitoring, industrial application. Today we are talking about capacity building, accelerating capacity building. What does it mean in water management? Why we are talking about accelerating today? We have an SDG 6, and we are worried because with climate change, maybe we are not reaching the goal, and maybe SDG 6 is off track. So we need each one of us, whatever we can do to bring the SDG 6 on track. What is going on and why we need capacity building and why we need to accelerate capacity building. As Jodie said, climate change has really disturbed the water map globally. So we have regions that they are drier and regions that they are being flooded. And this changing in the map also changed the government management of the water resources and put pressure on groundwater. Groundwater, which is the last reserve that we are having, and if we use that inappropriately and not being managed well, we are really putting in a danger our life, the life of our next generation, our environment, and peace. And I think the question that we are all asking, how we can manage something that we can see, something that it's difficult to measure. And this is what I want there, where I want to bring the role of technology, the role of innovation, the role of science in managing things that we need data, we need the technology, and we need information. The agency, as Jody said, she's the head of the isotope hydrology program, and she's leading also one of the world state-of-the-art laboratory on isotope hydrology. We have been working on water, particularly groundwater, for 60 years. We have been helping our member states. The last 10 years, I think we have spent more than 30 million building capacity in more than 100 member states using isotope technology to really respond to key questions. Where is the water? How much is in there? How old is that water? Meaning, is that water will stay there, is going to be replenished, or it's over when we have used it? And how good is that water? It's a key question that each manager, each policy maker, each decision maker needs this information to make a good management of water resources. Now, why we need this, why we need it now? Because I think most of you have been at COP27. We heard that if we don't do anything, temperature is on the rise. Again, water resources will be at critical point. So we need to bring this information. We need data. We need accurate data to the policy makers to know how they prioritize water resources, how they can do better in terms of management of water resources. If we don't bring this information, they won't be able to manage. If we don't build the capacity of young scientists, men and women at universities, at science institutions, at water laboratories, we will not be able to bring this information. And that's why at the agency, we believe strongly that not only we need to build capacity, but we need to build networks. We need to sustainability. Once we have a capacity in Kenya or in Morocco, in my country, or in South Africa, or anywhere else, we need these labs to talk to each other, to share know-how, to share best practices, to share data at regional, at sub-regional level. And that's why we're talking to our partners, we are talking to you, to come along together to build this network of laboratories worldwide. We have laboratories at different level. Laboratory at DEV, laboratory at the IAs at certain level that can bring capacity in laboratories in Kenya, laboratories in South Africa, to help laboratories in Niger, in Burkina Faso, in Malawi, to be able to manage their water resources, to bring this data. So we need to work together and bring this to the policymakers that they need this data, accurate data. Measuring is not easy. I'm a lab person. We need to measure properly. We need to be able to compare measurement. We need to be able that data that I'm giving to my minister is accurate and right one, that my minister can go to the government and say, hey, I need financing, I need a strategy to talk to my agriculture people, to talk to potable water people, etc. So it's a call for you all to come together, to work together to build this capacity building for men and women around the world. And I thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Najat. I think it's always useful to have that type of introduction because I think the International Atomic Energy Agency within the UN sphere is a little bit less well known, even though we are very, very active. I now would like to move to the next slide. And I'm just going to give a short contextualization of the type of work that we do at the agency. And I call this the Groundwater Bank. If you could move to the next slide, please. So I've used this analogy a couple of times now. When we manage our lives, we get a job. That job gives us money. We use that money to address our short-term needs and our long-term needs. We need to buy food today. We need to buy a house to live in the next 5 years. We need to save for our retirement. We put that money in the bank and we watch the balance. We make sure that the pots of money that we have allocated for different purposes stay in balance. And we do that by looking at our statement, looking at our investment return. But let's have a look at the groundwater bank. If we could have the next slide, please. So we have a source and we put that source, that water, into the bank, our groundwater system, and we make withdrawals from it. And those withdrawals are also for different types of needs. And some of those are short-term needs, growing the food we need to feed us tomorrow. Some of them are mid-term needs to provide energy or energy development, economic development. And some of them are long-term needs to support future generations. We need to balance those needs. We need to understand which pots of money, which pots of water we put towards which need. But where is our statement? Where do we get the statement that says how much we're using and how much we've saved? One of the things that we do at the International Atomic Energy Agency is we use isotope techniques, isotope hydrology, and we use these techniques to help us get to that statement. Is the water we're using fossil water? Was it replenished a millennia ago, or was it replenished last year? What is the quality of that water? How is it changing? So we look at timescales of processes. We work with our member states, we work with our counterparts to build capacity in this way to answer this question. But it's not to say that that's the only way that we should look at capacity development. And here I would like to ask Eddie, you are the rector IHE Delft, you've been directly involved in lots of different types of capacity development. So if I start with one question, sustainability of water. Is groundwater sustainable? And is there enough critical thinking about this issue?
Thank you, Jody. I also thank you for, I think, a quite nice introduction here. I think there's, as far as I'm concerned, a short, simple answer, that's no. I think that if you look at what Jody put down here is that we have a problem with our bank. And I think if you look at a couple of examples, like in Yemen, in Iran, in India, everywhere you see the groundwater tables lowering much faster than we replenish it. And I think that's one of the important parts there. If we want to make groundwater to be used in a sustainable way, we have to make sure that we not only withdraw from our bank, but we also replenish the bank in times of, say, abundance. And that, I think, is not happening at the moment. So I think that and there you also get to what you mentioned about capacity development. There, I think there is an urgent need actually to increase the knowledge together that we have in areas on how we can use groundwater also to overcome periods of droughts, but in a sustainable way. And I think that is sometimes a little bit oversimplified. So that's where I also see a good need for example, stable isotope use to get better information on how the system works. And then based on that, you also need knowledge on how to use it in a sustainable way. And of course, that means where you get to all the users there, all the needs, and everyone has their own priority. And I think that also requires that the people that are making the decisions know where it's needed for, but also know how the bank looks like. So that they can assure that at the end of the story, that it can be after a year, but can also be after 10 years, that bank reserve is being put back into place.
We have to share a microphone. All right. So thank you, Eddie. I hear you, and you've talked about different sectors and different analyses, but in that discussion, in that description, there's an element of critical thinking, right? That people have to be able to analyze the problem. They have to be able to identify the problem before they analyze the problem. And that requires capacity development, so we've mentioned. So capacity development, as I said, it's a kind of an all-encompassing term. How would you, if you were going to provide a definition of capacity development, how would you define it? Do you restrict it in one way? Do you make it all encompassing? How do we get at capacity development? Because it tends to be this bucket term that we use that identifies a very wide range of actions.
I agree that's often used in maybe two different ways. One is the bucket use, but the other one is that capacity development is sometimes seen as education or training. I think in reality, at least as far as I'm concerned, it's a little bit in the middle there. I do think that capacity development is about sharing knowledge with individuals. So that's about the training and the education part, but you can do that, of course, in a lot of different ways. The second part, and I think that's maybe as important, is that it's also about institutions. So it's about strengthening institutions, because there's no use if you train somebody about the use of stable isotopes, and then you don't make sure that you have a lab where they can analyze those samples. And that's true for all the other things that they need as well. I also think, but then you're going to do a little bit wider definition of capacity development. That's also about if you create and train people, you have the institutions, you have to make sure that there is a sound financial basis also for that. But there's also a governance system in place that allows you to act. You also want to have certain decisions that are drawn on information and, for example, on data or other tools, that information is being used and that it leads to a well-informed decision that needs to be taken to assure which of those 6 or 5 needs that are there are handled first and maybe one other later. That's a quite difficult decision, and sometimes you end in the political part there. So that's where you need a good governance system in place that allows you to make those decisions and go all the way up. Thank you, Jody.
Right, thank you, Eddie. I'm going to pass from Eddie to Viviana now. Viviana has been one of our technical experts who has helped us to implement training programs, hosted fellows, supported students that we are supporting as part of our programs. And one of the things that I want to ask and discuss now is there's capacity development and then there's effective capacity development. So from your technical background, what do you see? How do you define effective capacity development?
Thank you, Jody. Well, I think one important element in the picture is knowledge. Of course, we have to have a good knowledge on the tools and techniques that we want to share, but also we need the knowledge of the social context where we operate. So for effective capacity development, we may need a two-ways approach. So we need to have a sound knowledge of the tools and techniques we want to share, for example, isotope hydrology. But also we need to get acquainted with the social context, the cultural aspects that shapes the relation that people have with groundwater and society have with groundwater. So we can address what we have listed here, so the needs. So with this joint way of working, this putting together this two way of knowledge, we can really make sure that we propose capacity development that is effective for the local context. And one example is to always to bear in mind that maybe some way of approaching a certain techniques or a way of setting up or helping to put in up a laboratory or a specific teaching techniques may be efficient and super efficient in one context, maybe not so efficient in another way. So we really need to put together the two aspects here. So the source, of course, the scientific source of knowledge for groundwater and techniques, and the knowledge of the social and cultural background.
Thank you, Viviana. I'm very glad that you brought up that social context. I think it's very important to recognise that the world is a very, very diverse place. The solutions that we make for one area are not the solutions that work in another area, and sometimes we lose sight of that a little bit. Let's hand it over to Agnes now. So Agnes, you come from a different environment. You are here representing Kenya. I want to ask you about the complexities of groundwater management. This is your role in Kenya. Do you think that the complexities of groundwater management are fully understood, particularly when it comes to building the needed technical capacities in your environment, for example?
Thank you, Judy, for that comment and question. I want to talk about the situation in Kenya. One, I would say that Kenya is a water scarce country. It has the water resources, which is below the global benchmark. We are affected by climate change. And recently, we were missing like 5 rainy seasons. Again, we are talking about moving away from rain-fed agriculture to what? And the only solution that from my institution that we are seeing is moving now to groundwater-fed agriculture. So those issues that are there, we have to consult within the stakeholders, we have to cooperate, we have to collaborate, and also we have to have the public-private partnership so that we can make the groundwater resources available for agriculture and also for food security and also for industrial and domestic and also for sustainability. So coming down to your question, the groundwater issues in Kenya are not well understood. And we have the complexity that is there. One is the regional perspective. When we look at the groundwater situation in Kenya, we realize that we have different lithologies. The water resources is not well understood. We have the governance issues that have been mentioned by majority of us here. And we have the regulations, we have the different institutions that are in place, but the gaps in terms of data is wanting. So we are talking about that, do I mention that allocating what is not yet measured? So it is just complex because it has to be measured before the allocation comes in place. So the needed capacity building needs to address those gaps, and we are glad that that is the approach that needs to be taken. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Agnes. I think that raises an important point about the fact that we've had a lot of capacity development actions and initiatives, and some of these have been effective, some of them have not been effective, but there are still gaps in our knowledge. Viviana, if we might change back to you, I know that this is something that you deal with, the current challenges. What are the gaps that you see at the moment? You've been a technical expert for us. You've been working particularly in Africa and dealing with projects that deal with or that are looking at water quality, which is really becoming a serious problem. What are the gaps in capacity that you see at the moment?
Well, probably the main gap that builds, the comment also builds on something that Agnes just mentioned, is that we probably need to go beyond the kind of silos, compartmentalized way of thinking. This means that, of course, we need to have a strong scientific base and we need techniques and the best available techniques, but maybe this is not sufficient. And if we limit our capacity only to producing data or analyzing data, and we don't share, we don't interact with the stakeholders, the local community, we don't engage with them, and so we remain in our technical bubble, we may have some good solution, but this cannot be effectively translated into reality. So we just make half of the way towards an effective capacity development. And so the challenge here, of course, is to still remain consistent while making space from learning from other disciplines and learning from other stakeholders. So this is a challenge over the challenge, but in my opinion, we cannot tackle the complexity of the interaction of the water cycle and even the complexity of the groundwater interaction with people and society only with single approaches. We need interdisciplinarity, we need transdisciplinarity if we really want to bridge the gap between people and society and make capacity development effective.
Yeah, I agree. And that maybe is a good opportunity to come back to DDG, because in your capacity as a DDG, you manage a portfolio across the Department of Nuclear Sciences and Applications that is very broad. What does the IAEA offer in terms of filling these gaps and addressing the issues that Viviana has brought up?
Yeah, thank you, Jody. I think capacity building at the agency is one of the big portfolio and big service that we are providing to our member states. We are not funding agency, but we are capacity building agency. We develop technology, we transfer the technology to the member state, and it's demand driven. So member state, they come to us, they ask help to manage for assistant to use the technology for water management. And we do that through, first, we transfer the technology, the know-how, training them on site, train them as individual, group, but also at regional level to share. And as you said, Jody, it's not one size for all, but it's tailor-made to the need of the country. Small island states, we are working with them on seawater intrusion, for example. Sahel region, we are working with them on mapping the groundwater, and because it has also a political implication. The Latin American also dry area in Latin America, also we are working on mapping also the groundwater there, and also individual countries. So we build this capacity to be sustainable, so people, they know how to do it and train others. This is our motto as well, is train the trainers. We need to build this capacity and continue building this capacity. But Viviana also mentioned something very important, is we push also our member state to bring this data. The prerequisite is what we call central criteria. We are not building capacity for a lab just to work in the lab, but we are building this capacity for the lab to bring this information to those that they need this information. And the Ministry of Agriculture, Ministry of Health, and other stakeholders. So this is prerequisite that the data should be shared and should be used for better management. We also build the capacity in research, in R&D activities, because technology evolves. And we need, when we say isotope hydrology, don't think immediately about radiation or big instrument. They are simple instruments that can be transferred immediately to labs, and you have done it, and I think we have also done it in other countries. So we need to continue developing this technology to be transferred easily and used easily by our member states. And this is through research. Thank you.
Thank you, Najat. I'm very proud of the work that we do, I must say, and I think it does bring a lot of value. And maybe I can then throw that back to Viviana. You have been responsible for transferring this technology. We are developing it. We need people to implement it and to bring it to the countries, and that's something that you've done. Do you see it making a difference to these countries? Well, this is actually not a question I've asked you directly before, which is somewhat embarrassing, but...
No, it's fine. I think it's very important, and I see the difference. I see in my very short experience, I have to say, well, it's not like I have many years of experience, but I've seen laboratories growing up. I see people that are getting skilled more and more, and they are eventually able to transfer this skill that they learn. And in a recent training we did in Morocco, we had the chance to work with many countries in Africa. We had many counterparts from Africa there, because it was the target of the training, and it was N15, and we saw a lot of potential. So the knowledge is there, the basis is there, and probably some additional knowledge should be brought in, but building or helping people to set laboratories, helping students to grow up and helping each other to transfer knowledge is of paramount importance, because I think the role of an expert is to transfer knowledge, but also make sure that the knowledge is there, and then eventually there won't be any need for an expert there. So you pass the knowledge, and then they in any country you can go, and then you can exchange and have neutral learning. But eventually I see that the overall goal is not to have any expert mission anymore.
Yeah, it's an interesting way of putting it. It's our goal is to make our jobs obsolete. That's true. Yours, not mine.
So I didn't say anything in my advantage.
The obvious point that comes up, though, when we hear about this is finances. And that's where we're going to pivot to the money person here. Francois, you're from the World Bank. So one of the major obstacles is often challenges securing adequate funding for countries' endeavours to build much needed capacity. We see this a lot. And even when it's built, sometimes it's not effective. Sometimes they're unable to spend the money that's been allocated. There's problems with delivery. How are financial institutions like the World Bank supporting countries build much needed capacities? And for example, in the way that we do with physical infrastructure, laboratories, for example.
Thank you, Jody, for this very nice question. Okay. First of all, I want to insist here that the World Bank is really supporting the activities that are being implemented by other agencies, and we perfectly align with your objective of this approach of support network and capacity building, and with the idea of getting, as Viviana was saying, getting the expertise inside the country for a better groundwater management. That being said, funding agencies or funding partners, they invest quite much in labs in general. As soon as it comes to assets, to investments, founding partners are easily able to work. And talking about the World Bank, we are funding a series of labs all over the world. The difficulty comes when we are talking about capacity building, because capacity building starts from the school to the university, and then after the university, it's all this specific training to your technologies, and after that, it's still working with your network, exchanging experts on the job training, all these things that you need for your lab experts to be performing well always. So their institution like the World Bank, they are stuck. We cannot, our project, which are time-based, usually it's 5 years, 6 years, 7 years, they cannot replace a long-term program that will invest in capacity building. So we can accompany on one-shot actions, one-shot. It can be 5 years long, but it's only punctual action, and especially in investment. For the rest, there are other partners. The World Bank, the World Bank is run through a very long list of rules that have been established by the member countries, the board of directors, and well, our clients, they are not the labs, they are at the Ministry of Finance, and we are to work to look globally. But there are many other financial partners, and I know many bilateral donors that have much more flexibility and that are supporting this. So if I had a word to say on that, I would say, well, for those who can support, please continue to support. For us, we can really cover the most expensive part, the investments, and we are trying to do so even in the isotopic hydrology, but lab in general, or water resource exploration in general. Water resource exploration, we know that the most expensive is not even the lab is the deep borehole where we want to take the sample. So we can help on that. We are not well equipped for helping on the capacity building, but there are other partners. So fortunately enough, I guess there is an overall financial environment that will allow you continue working.
Yeah, this is one of the problems that I've seen, that although we spend a lot of time, energy, money in building up capacity development, the sustainability of the actions are a problem. That I've been to labs where somebody has come in, they've bought equipment, it's been placed in a lab, and yet you go back 5 or 10 years later, it's just sitting there, it's gathered dust, it hasn't been used the way that it was intended. And this is something that we really need to try and avoid going forward. We need to be more strategic about our actions, but we need to talk more about the sustainability of the capacity development component that goes with that technical investment. The building of the lab means nothing if there aren't people who are trained to operate the lab. There aren't people who are trained to use the data that the lab generates. And we need to really consider seriously the sustainability of that component in partnership with the physical infrastructure. Agnes, if I can come back to you now. I know that Kenya is a recipient of IAEA technical support. I am sure that Kenya has been a recipient of other types of support as well. Are these actions sustainable? What are the limitations with the interventions, and how can we better bring value to the country? How can we better position it to allow you to do the research and the monitoring and the water analysis that you need to do, that Kenya needs to do?
Yes, Kenya has benefited a lot on the support from IEA. One is on the development of the capacity building on personnel. Personnel in 2 approaches. One is for the young professionals. And currently we have some programs at national level and also at regional level, and working with IEA where staff are benefiting. We already have 2 staff in Morocco currently serving for 2 months. We have also given the nominations at a regional project where we are expecting at PhD level and also for master's level. IEA, through scientific visits, they normally train the managers. So we are having that sort of capacity building from IEA and also the experts. Through this capacity building, we also have the laboratories and equipment that have been mentioned, that the infrastructure that is very expensive, and the sustainability aspect. What the government in Kenya is doing in terms of sustaining this infrastructure and capacity building is one is to board. If you are trained under the government, you are boarded for some years. Number 2, we normally have the counterpart funding. If the IEA is funding us for some sort of an amount of money, there is also at IEA what they call the project percentage that the government has to provide. That amount of money help us to sustain, so that we are able now to maintain the equipment. All this capacity building adds to doing the water resources assessment and also characterizing the aquifers, finding the extent of the aquifers, both in terms of the aerial extent and also the depth. And all this data add up to a database. It normally now inform policy in government. So we are benefiting in that kind of relationship and partnership, that we are able now to have hydrogeological maps and also using the exploratory wells, that kind of research, which are also converted to be production of observation wells. We look forward for this partnership so that we are able to benefit in terms of having a regional laboratory where the member state in the region benefit from the laboratory in terms of analyzing their groundwater and also on the transboundary issues. You know, the aquifers are not respecters of the administrative boundaries. So we look forward for that kind of partnership with the neighboring countries, that you are able now to have the cooperative framework out of the analysis that we are doing. Thank you.
Thank you, Agnes. I have some more questions that I was going to give to Francois, and I wanted to hear from Emma, but I think actually at this point that I might open up the floor to questions, to inputs from others. Before we hear from Emma, who is listening and taking on board, hopefully, what we've talked about, and giving us a perspective, because, sorry, if you could go forward, or this slide here. One of the things that when we look at this idea of the groundwater bank, we're talking about, at the moment, we're really talking about our generation. What are we doing now that impacts our generation? But ultimately, we have to think about future generations. When we take groundwater out of the groundwater system, is it our water that we're dealing with, or is it our grandchildren's water that we're dealing with? And so I'd like to hear from Emma on this. But before I do that, I'd like to ask if there are any questions that anybody would like to ask. Yes, we have a hand up. Jared.
Hi, Jody, and thank you to everyone in the panel members. It's been very interesting to follow what you're talking about. As you mentioned in the beginning, a lot of your discussions have been surrounding technical and infrastructure-based capacity development. And maybe this question is directed more at Prof. Moers, coming from IHE Delft, which has an incredibly famous MSc and PhD program. Do you see your especially international students that study there in the context of groundwater return to the countries that they came from and increase the capacity for the opportunities that you've given them there? This skill retention is somewhat, in my opinion, really important. So I'd like to hear your opinion on this.
I think if you look a little bit at the history, I think in the past, there's about more than 90% of our students, they went back to their countries to work there. What you see happening, say, in the last couple of years, that there are also students staying sometimes for different reasons, either in the Netherlands or somewhere in Europe or UN organization. But in almost all cases, they are employed there to work either in their own country again through this employment, or a neighboring country from the region. So I think there is a real added value there. And sometimes those reasons are really personal. So students can't go back because of other things than saying that they're not interested to work in their country. I would like, before Emma says something, maybe something she can also pick on board, and was a little bit triggered by your question, is what I sometimes also encounter is that in countries the middle generation is disappearing in departments and institutions. And there are different reasons for that. One is that sometimes I think the capacity development plan is not looking at a continuous, say, adding people to the knowledge base. But another very important one is the career perspectives in the water sector are not that good. So in some countries, it's really financially not very attractive to work in the sector, which I hope that we are able to change. So I see that also as a part of capacity development, is that there is also a good HR plan within that division that would like to implement something like that.
Thank you, Eddie. Do we have any other questions at the moment? Because what I might do now, actually, I have sorry, yes, there's a question at the end there.
Hello, I am Dhaval from India. In 2010, one of the organizations in India analyzed all the hydrogeology master's programs across the country offered by different universities, and came to a conclusion that 80% of the syllabus still focuses around groundwater exploration, groundwater development, while the paradigm of groundwater development has long left the shores of India, and we are now in a stage of overexploitation. And that is where the question about new types of programs coming up. So in the last 5 to 10 years, I see about 3-4 different courses, master's programs coming up in India by different universities who are not looking at groundwater in the way we used to look at it, say 20-30 years back. So basically the question is like open to the entire panel, but maybe more to Eddie, given the educational background, is do we need to ask ourselves about how we look at capacity development now? I mean, moving beyond technology or moving beyond, say, transfer of skills or things like that. I mean, do we ask questions differently, or do we ask different questions? Is the question. Thanks.
I also think it's a good point. I've been teaching in India also for myself for some time. And I think that what you see and where there is a clear need, although not everybody is convinced about that yet, I think this interdisciplinarity and this holistic approach that Jody was pointing out to, I think that's a very important part to bring into the educational training. I still think we need technicians. I still think we need to develop techniques, but I also think we should have people that are well capable of understanding the complexity of the system. And I do think that that has been lacking in the past too much. And so I hope that is changing. I also see that changing. If it's going fast enough, I'm not sure, but I think we can push for that.
Yes, we have another question.
No, thank you very much. Kerstin Dannert from Ask for Water in Switzerland. Just following on from your question, you've kind of triggered a thought. But, you know, for a university to develop a new master's program or an undergraduate program, where are the resources for that? I mean, is that the university? Is there global resources available to meet that need? Because so much is now in the private sector. And if there isn't the money to be made from those students, maybe we're in a bit of a chicken and egg scenario about these other educational programs that are needed. So I'm just kind of throwing it, I don't know if it's a question or a statement, I'm not sure, but just throwing it at you.
Yes, that's music to my heart. I'm really convinced that we're not doing well. I think we're talking about capacity development. We're talking about that we should finance capacity development, and I don't think we're doing that. Yes, but it's not enough. So what I personally think is that there is a real need, and I appreciate what Francois was saying about the World Bank, but I do think there is a real need to think about capacity development in a way how we are thinking about, for example, green bonds or social impact bonds, meaning that you are providing a possibility to invest with a very slow rate on the return of investment, a very long period of this investment. I know that there is an educational fund that's for primary schooling and secondary schooling where countries can apply to, but it is not there for water. And I do think that it's not only about schooling. I really think that it's also about this institutional strengthening. So also where the assets that the World Bank is providing, they also should be financed there. But I think you should do both. I don't think you should do one there and the other one there. So maybe I disagree a little bit with Francois that there is enough other ways of financing this capacity development that you were talking about, because I don't see that. And I think it should be stronger. And I would plea for actually a combined investment. I have been in discussions there because what sometimes the answer that you get, okay, I'm investing in a training and then somebody's working there 5 years and they move somewhere else. And you lose money. I don't believe that. I think every country that invests in capacity development always wins money. It's the best investment that you can do, but you have to be willing enough as maybe a water ministry to invest in the capacity in your ministry and also be happy if that person starts working at the Ministry of Financial Affairs or at the Ministry of Health. And I think if that approach would be there, then I think we can make this step forward. And otherwise, we're a little bit stuck on what you were saying.
Yeah, sorry, Francois, yeah.
Thank you, Jody. Yeah, if I can add one word on that, because it's the most important thing. It's knowing the groundwater resource, or exploring the groundwater resource, not exploring, developing the groundwater resource is something, as I said before, we can do it. We can find the finance for that. The main difficulty is groundwater expertise, high level, and as you say, Eddie, about someone was a level that allows a global view of the things. So we are talking about very high level expertise. With the Sahelian universities, we had a very interesting roundtable on this topic. And the thing is, they are ready to put their resources together and to set up a global, a regional master degree level and so on. What is missing is the funding. And for us, a standard funding agency, we cannot bring that because it's project-based. And what we want is long-term. So the solution we identify up to now is to set up a trust fund. And this is probably the only solution for long-term training. It's to set up trust funds that are dedicated to training, high-level training in groundwater expertise, which is certainly needed.
So listening to this discussion, I have a diagram that I want to show. It's the map. Can you show that map? It's at the end. Yeah. This map, this diagram. So when I listen to what you were speaking about, there's the sustainability of actions, there's the employment opportunities, there's the targeted direction. And this is something that we've been working on as a concept to put forward. We have been investing in some equipment in this lab, another piece of equipment in that lab. And what we think that we should do is that we should have a more systematic and targeted approach and create, instead of individual laboratories, a network, a formal network of laboratories where we have differentiated nodes, anchor nodes that are strong regional labs that host training courses, that support fellows, that can educate masters, PhD students, that there are growth nodes, laboratories that are just developing, that have some equipment, have some capacity, but need more to grow. And then there are development nodes, laboratories that are just starting out on this journey. But the network links them together. It gives people like ourselves, IHE Delft, the World Bank, it gives them something to invest in, to support either the infrastructure. The World Bank can support labs or build labs that link into this network, that the IHE Delft is providing training opportunities, the network is providing employment opportunities within these countries, that there is a sustainability of the actions. And this is a concept that we're working on, that I have been discussing and working with the DDG. And I think because the time is getting late, I do want to hear from Emma, who is the youth of today. She is going to be the manager of one of the anchor nodes 20 years from now, and she's going to be training up a new cohort. This is my idealized world, of course. But Emma, let's get your perspective. I want to give DDG an opportunity to have a closing remark, but I would like to hear from you as the youth. What do you see? How does this gel with you? What have you taken away? What are your key messages that you want to address?
Thank you, Jody. So I think the fact that you're prioritizing incorporating the youth in this is something that's really key, because you have a lot of fresh minds, new perspectives, and people who not only want to learn new skills, but also really need them, right? You leave university with no practical experience, and that's something that you really, want. And I think at the core, the youth needs two things. The first is an opportunity to start, and the second is an opportunity to grow. So I think it's in human nature, when you first learn something, you have a desire, okay, what's next? And that's where I think this IEA's concept of these nodes is really the perfect solution to this, because you can start somewhere and you can think, oh, okay, I think I want to experience something different. You can move somewhere else within the node and you're still contributing to the greater capacity development. And yeah, just to finish off, I think you cannot ignore the importance of the attitude of the teacher in all of this, right? When you are teaching someone in the youth something new, you are essentially shaping their minds. And if they're taught knowing that their perspective and their input is valued and will have an impact, I think it will motivate them to stay within the network. Yeah, so I think assuming the network can function well and the attitude of those teaching is correct, I think it can actually be sustainable capacity development, and you won't have this you teaching someone and they leave and never come back.
Thank you, Ebba. I think that's something I hadn't considered when we were developing this, and I'm happy that DDG is taking notes, because I'm not taking notes, and this is something that we will want to remember. If there are no other questions, there is a question?
Yes. Thank you for the opportunity. My name is Maha from Nile Basin Initiative, and I am the project technical lead for the groundwater GEF UNDP. When you were talking, there was a question, in my mind. It was ringing many bells. Now, we have done lots of capacity buildings. In fact, we have been doing a lot of years capacitating our people. Has that managed our resources well? Are our resources well known to us? Is groundwater well known to us? Taking in consideration that one of the universities in the area is like Makerere is 120 years old, like Khartoum University is 100 years old. They've been doing this for many years, yet resources are not well managed. So what's the problem? Where is the gap? Is capacity building driven by the need? Because we need something, then we capacitate ourselves towards it so we can explore our resources and manage it in that way? Or it is just something we do it routinely and then we don't implement? Are the people who we capacitate, they take action towards management of our resources? Or we just capacitate them and leave them apart? What is the link between decision maker and people who know? And are they able to practice what they have learned? And then sustainability issues, and then enabling environments, and then the science itself. You can't just inject 3 weeks into somebody's mind and then you let him go and you say that I have capacitated him. We find that most of our people, they go for 3 weeks, 3 months, capacity building, then they come back, they don't practice, they don't find the right institutions. So as if you are throwing your money in the air. So there are many questions, how to link this, how to think thoughtfully into capacity building that can enable us to do the right decisions, to manage our resources rightfully. Do we start it from the very basic schools and then we build it upwards as children grow up? Or, because I've been around a lot and I've been visiting many countries, it is the same story. Thank you.
Yeah, there are many aspects of what we do for which there's no easy solution. And there are many problems that are just being perpetuated by many of the actions that we take. But one of the advantages that I see with a network is that it specifically encourages communication and dialogue. And I think some, not all, but some of the problems that you're identifying now result because of issues to do with trust, about willingness to discuss problems, issues, groundwater resources, scientific development with other people. And some areas have this as a more prominent problem than others. And when you have a network, and what we've seen, for example, in some of our programs, instead of running national programs, we ran regional programs. And in the regional program, we incorporated MSc students and PhD students. And we drew them together into, this year we had the first ever PhD conference of the students that we are supporting. It's about 30 students. And what that does is creates a cross-pollination of ideas, not just of ideas, but problems that need to be solved. And I think that mechanisms that create the opportunities to link together, to find people who have similar problems in similar situations and get them talking to one another, not you and me talking here at UNESCO, but people from Egypt and Sudan or Ethiopia and Eritrea, to try and get them talking together about the problems that they share. And there are many examples, and some of those discussions are extremely difficult because of political complications. But we need to try and find mechanisms that allow people to interact. I like to think that the network will be a mechanism by which we can do this. It won't solve all of those problems, but it will take us further forward. Yeah. I think we need to finish up. We're a little bit over. I would like to give an opportunity for Najat to say a couple of final words, and then we'll
Thank
wrap.
you, Jody, and thank you, Maya, right? Maha. Thank you, Maha, for, I fully agree, because I think you, Jody, said that we at the agency of 60 years, we built capacity here and there. And then what happened normally is the member state who take over, and it's their responsibility. We don't know what happened to these youth, young people that we have trained, how we can support them and how we can sustain them. And then Emma, I think she gave some inspiring words. She said, shaping the mind, and she said, supporting those youth, those young mind, and sustaining them. I like this triple S. Shaping, sustaining, supporting and sustaining. And this through education, through the training, but then how to sustain, how to keep them. And that's why I think the idea of having this network, but not only having the network, is to giving them the platform to communicate, giving them, using the digital technology to give them to communicate among themselves and exchange. And so they keep up. Because we need funding, we need support from the government as well to give them impetus and give them a push that they are used, that they are needed. And it's complex, it's not easy, but each one of us has to do its part. The education, the UN agencies, the funding agencies, and the government, we need to come together. And I think a platform like this at least give this platform for dialogue and for sharing and discussion. Thank you.
Please, go ahead. Last question, though, because we do have to wrap up.
Okay, I have just a short question. I would like to know how do you evaluate and assess the program implemented by you? Do you have a system to assess the program?
Yes. So the answer to that is yes. And you are more than welcome to come and talk to me about how that operates. But we do have a comprehensive program to see how effective the program is, but that is run at the end of the program. And I think what we're all asking about is what happens after that. And that's where we need to work on the sustainability.